OCC BIO212, we are going to be looking at muscles today. So this is going to be lab lectures 1 and 2. I am going to be using the Van Greiner A&P Lab Manual 2 book, and just remember that we are going to be using the 2nd edition. In order to be able to get access to the website behind me, it's through Van Greiner, so you need this book. So in the front cover of your lab manual, you will see the directions and then the registration code to be able to get logged in. During this lecture, it will go fast because the advantage of being able to video this lecture is that you can rewind and replay and pause at your convenience. Additionally, I don't have students asking questions during this time. So it works out very well to just be able to go through the muscles all in one lecture. We're going to be focusing on the kitty cat today. So this would be like lab lectures 1 and 2 put together, and then the third lab lecture, which will be next, is going to be the human musculature in addition to review for the exam. So I would like for you to be able to open your lab manual. If you do not have your lab manual yet, that is okay. Just go ahead and open the PDF file. I've downloaded it onto our Blackboard page, and download that, open it. You will have to turn to the page number that is on the actual paper that has been scanned into the computer versus what the actual PDF file says its pages. So make sure that you are looking at this page number versus what the PDF page number is. That way you can follow along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight down table 1. We are going to be looking at how the equivalents of both human and kitty cat muscles come together. So follow along with me. I will give you some tips about how to keep them to memory so that you can identify those, since we are not in the lab together, to be able to dissect yourself. We will be using photos. Okay, so, and that's what Van Greiner comes in handy for. So beginning on page 2, table 1, we are going to be looking at pec major and pec minor muscles. Those two are easy to combine in terms of memorization. So if you go ahead and look on page 34, figure 15, it is going to show you pec major and pec minor. So I'm also going to open the Van Greiner images as well. So I'm going to step out of view for a moment, and you will see it pulled up on Van Greiner. So again, you can see that the advantage of being able to utilize Van Greiner is that you will see that there is human musculature, there is a practice exam over the human musculature, and there is the same with the kitty cat. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the cat musculature in addition to there is a practice exam as well. So it is to your advantage to be able to have access to this because it is so easy to get an A on this exam because you have the exam right in front of you. Remember, the syllabus from your text, the syllabus in your text for exam 1, I'll read it to you right out of our syllabus. is going to consist of 25 questions. They are worth 1 point each. It's over both cat and human musculature that are covered in labs 1, 2, and 3. Again, it's worth 25 points. Only whole number points will be awarded, and there will be illustrations. 13 of those will be from human musculature, and 12 of those will be from the kitty cat musculature. This is not multiple choice, and no word list will be provided. So again, I cannot stress enough how important it is to gain access to Van Greiner so that you can utilize the practice exams. Okay, there's 2 of them, human musculature and kitty cat musculature. So let's go ahead and jump right in on page 2, pec major, pec minor. Again, you can see those on pages 34, figure 15. So let's go ahead and open that up. I'm going to, let's utilize download this presentation. Technical difficulties, 1 moment. Okay, we'll hit start. We'll just go sequential, and so pec major and pec minor are up here. So let's go ahead and look at pec major and pec minor. And I guess that's a little bit closer. So again, we are going to be just going through the list of muscles. So in your kitty cat, in your lab manual, you'll be able to see these images not only here, but you'll also be able to see them within your lab manual as well, okay? So this image is on page 34, figure 15, okay? Moving on, what do we need to know? Let's go back to pec major, pec minor. So what do we need to know about these 2 muscles? Pec major is superior and smaller, whereas pec minor is inferior, but it's larger and thicker, okay? Moving on to chunk, trapezius, and deltoid together. So let's find trapezius. Let's see, deltoid is here first. Let's do trapezius first. Let me see. He's over here. So trapezius, here's one view of trapezius. Okay, in your text, another view of trapezius is on figure 16. It's on page 34, figure 16. Okay? So what do we need to know about trapezius? Trapezius is a large, we refer to them as being the traps, okay? So it is on the back and the neck. So it's on the dorsal shoulder side. Note that in your lab manual, on page 5, it talks about the muscles of the dorsal shoulder. So in the kitty cat, we are looking at the general trapezius and the general deltoid, whereas in the human musculature, it's just trapezius and it's just deltoid. But what you need to know about both of these muscles is that an acronym to help you remember is that they break down into 3 parts. So on page 5, if you look under trapezius, under general trapezius, and then it has in parentheses cat, it has clavotrapezius, acromiotrapezius, and spinotrapezius. So one acronym to remember that is my name. So my name is Cassandra, and what does my name begin with? C-A-S. If it works, use it. If it doesn't, that's okay. But you need to know that that breaks down into each of those 3. Now, it's not shown in the lab manual. You will just need to know that for part of your lab exam, and then again for the lecture portion of your BIO212 course. So if you flip over to page 6 of your lab manual, you will see the deltoid for the human, and then under that, the general deltoid for the cat. So one way to keep this very simple, again, is CAS. So it's clavo, acromio, and spinodeltoid. Clavodeltoid can also be referred to as clavobrachialis, but just to keep things uniform, I found that students prefer just being able to keep deltoid all the way down. So what do we need to know about the deltoid? Think shoulder. And again, don't forget the acronym CAS for both general trapezius and general deltoid muscles. If you would like to see what these 2 look like in your lab manual, look at page 34. I believe it's figure 16. Shows you a good picture. It's a little bit different. Actually, I think, I do believe that this is the same picture. So go ahead and compare both your lab manual and Van Greiner. Moving on, the next set of muscles that I would like you to look at are what's next in your lab manual. And your lab manual says, let me get to the page. Next up, we have linea alba, external obliques, internal obliques, rectus abdominis, and transversus abdominis. So what do we need to know about the abdominal muscles? Some of these are superficial, some of these are deep, but they are, just think your ventral, which is anterior. Remember, in order to learn these muscles, you have to be really strong in your bones. And so if you're having a hard time with a lot of these muscles, what you should do is go back and review your bones. If you're strong in bones, you'll be strong in muscles. Anyhow, what do we know about linea alba? We know that Greek and Latin is what makes up a lot of our medical terminology. So we know that linea means line, and alba refers to the color white. So this is a white line down the abdomen. What do we need to know about, next on our list is external obliques. So with the external obliques, you know that external is something that's above, something more internal. And oblique is referring to something at an angle. So when we talk about the layers of muscles in the abdomen, you know, they don't just come, you know, in a big muscle. We have to, in the lab, we have to dissect it apart. And so we have them in layers. And when we talk about the external obliques, they lie on top of the internal obliques. And I want you to think of like a network, like a mesh network. And what that means is that you have these muscle fibers that have to lay on top of each other in a certain way. So some of them lay totally horizontal, for instance. Some of them lay vertical. Some of them lay at an angle. So what we're doing is we're looking at how that core stays so strong. We're looking at the muscles of that core. So with the external obliques, the direction of these muscle fibers is going at an oblique angle, at a diagonal angle, okay? With, these muscles are pretty broad and flat, and it extends down the entire abdomen, okay? What else do we need to know about the linea alba? Okay, so going back to linea alba, we know that it is a straight, thin, white, fibrous band or line that lines the abdominal area. So let's look at page 36, figure 18. So 36, figure 18. And then let's go back here and let's look at here is the same image as what is in your lab manual on page 36, figure 18. We have the external obliques, we have the rectus abdominis, we have the linea alba, which means that straight line down the center, and then we have the external obliques. So you can see that the direction of these fibers, if you were to look very closely, you can see the fibers of the internal obliques, they're running this direction. The external obliques, it's sort of folded over, but those are going in an opposite direction. When we look at the rectus abdominis, rectus means what? It means a straight line as well. So rectus is something that is straight. And then abdominis means that it's covering the entire abdomen. So when we think about the rectus abdominis, I want you to think of that those fibers are running vertically. They're running straight up and down. The internal obliques, if you can see those fibers are running opposite what the external obliques are. What else do we need to know about these? The rectus abdominis is running parallel to linea alba. So you can see this better if you have if you have this blown up closer to you or your lab manual blown up closer to you, you will see these better. So those are a good set of muscles to chunk together because they're all found in one place. Moving on, transversus abdominis, we are omitting that from the kitty cat, so go ahead and cross that one off. When I say to cross it off, make sure that you pay particular attention to what you're crossing off. It doesn't mean that you cross off both. It means that in the kitty cat, it is absent or we are not going to be able to see it very well. In this case, we're omitting it, and you'll see that there's several of those just going straight down the line. Next up, we have latissimus dorsi and lumbodorsal fascia. So if you look on page, and chunk these two together as well, if you look on page 37, figure 19, which is just the very next page, you will see what we're talking about. Let me get to it on here as well. Lumbodorsal fascia. Okay, so latissimus dorsi, lumbodorsal fascia. So in this image, we often refer to our latissimus dorsi as our lats, and what you should think of for that is it's like a corset. It sort of helps to wrap. It's a large triangular sheet that kind of resembles a corset. Also, think of that as being the swimmer's muscle, okay? So swimmer's muscle for latissimus dorsi. For that lumbodorsal fascia. So again, this is where medical terminology comes in handy. So lumbodorsal fascia. So if we break that apart, we know that lumbo refers to what? The lumbar region, whereas dorsal refers to what? The posterior side. And fascia is referring to a band of white fibrous tissue. So you can clearly see this white fibrous tissue running down the back. So that is our lumbodorsal fascia. So those two together are very helpful learning in a pair like that. Next up, we have triceps brachii. Triceps brachii has 3 heads. It has a lateral head, a medial head, and a long head. Let's pull up the image for that one as well. They have them all together. Okay, long head and lateral head are shown in these 2 images, which is also on page 35, figure 17. So if you look at page 35, figure 17, it's sort of the same image, just a different angle, but it's actually showing you, actually it's page 34 and 35, okay? It's showing you both this image and, let me go back, the medial head. And then within, it's showing you that medial head right in there. It's really tiny, it's very thin. When we talk about the lateral, medial, and long head, one way to remember that is LAMLO. So lateral, LA, M for medial, and low for long. So LAMLO, if that helps to remember the 3 heads of triceps brachii. And again, you can see that on page 34, figure 16, as well as page 35, figure 17, okay? And by clicking on triceps brachii, lateral head, long head, medial head right here. So when we open this, again, it's just showing you the differences between both the lateral and the long head, because remember, the medial head is deep in there. So we have to separate those 2 muscles and go in with a probe so that you can see this medial head. So if we had a probe, we would be able to get a really, we'd be able to hook that up so that you could see it a little bit better. But actually, page 35 in your lab manual is a good image of that. Let's see, next up, we are going to look at these 3 muscles together. So think the ventral thigh. So we're going to be looking at gracilis, sartorius, and tensor fascia lata. Okay, so click out of here. So first we have gracilis. So let's go gracilis. So we have gracilis and sartorius here on Van Greiner, and then in your text you will see it on page 41. Figure 26 is gracilis and sartorius. For gracilis, I want you to think groin. G, gracilis groin. For sartorius, I want you to think toward the stomach, S. So sartorius S, toward the stomach, okay? It's not up by the stomach, it's just that abdominal area. So what do we sometimes generally call that area? The stomach area. Sartorius extends diagonally, so it means it comes up onto that abdominal area slightly. Sartorius compromises that inner surface of the thigh, moving toward the stomach. Tensor fascia lata. Let me go toward this one. So this is that tensor fascia lata, and sometimes we refer to it as TFL. Okay, so with TFL, we know that it is a large sort of fan-shaped image. Let me see if your lab manual has a picture of this. It looks like maybe page 38. So go back, yep. On page 38, figure 21, it would be number 4, TFL, tensor fascia lata. And we know that with TFL, there's a thin sheet of fascia that covers that lateral part of the thigh, that lateral sort of anterior part of the thigh, ventral. So group those 3 together. That would be helpful in learning those in that group of 3. Next up, we have gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, and gluteus minimus. Now for the kitty cat, go ahead and omit or eliminate gluteus minimus. And if you would like to see an image of this, look on page 38, figure 21. It shows you both gluteus medius and gluteus maximus, and it is on this image as well. So here we have maximus, which is actually smaller in comparison to medius. Okay. The medius on the kitty cat is thicker, and it's more anterior in front of the gluteus maximus in the kitty cat. The gluteus maximus, think smaller and strap-like, whereas the gluteus medius, I want you to think thicker and meatier. It's bigger, it's more superior, or anterior to, superior would be more correct way to say that, to gluteus maximus. And it is almost entirely covered by the TFL. And you can see, like for instance, that this has been cut. The TFL, tensor fascia lata, has been cut so that we can gain access to what's underneath of that. But the sheet extends all the way up to that lumbodorsal fascia. So it's in unison, but we've dissected it back so that you can see what's below there. Moving on, next up on our list, let me make sure that I'm following your text correctly. Next up, we have tibialis anterior, gastrocnemius, and soleus. So let's go ahead and look at those. Back out of here. So first up is tibialis anterior. So here's tibialis anterior. Here's one image. This is more of like a lateral image versus a anterior image, okay, or ventral image. So you can see that with the probe in there, it's right on the what? The tibia bone. So tibialis anterior. Again, this is how medical terminology helps you out. Being strong in muscle, knowing that what bone we're talking about, the tibia, and anterior means what? Something ventral, something front, as opposed to posterior. So what do we need to know about tibialis anterior? It's a long tendon, it's long, and so there is a portion that spans over a large surface area from the knee to the foot. What else do we need to know about it? It's just elongated and anterior to the tibia. So our next muscle that we're going to be looking at is gastrocnemius. So gastrocnemius, this is the muscle when it's on the posterior calf. It makes up the majority of your calf muscle. And here, let's see. Okay. Here's the posterior image or the dorsal image. We can find gastrocnemius on page, let's see. It looks like page 47 and 48. So let me flip to that right now. So we have page 47, figure 33. So there's gastrocnemius there. And then also, if you flip over to page 48, there's another great picture of it on figure 34. So gastrocnemius, think it's your tiptoe muscle. And that has that's what we call, that large calf muscle has two heads that essentially fall into create the Achilles tendon, or it's also called the calcaneal tendon. So looking at gastrocnemius, that double-bellied muscle comes to form this tendon right down through here, and it will extend. So it's elongated, and again, that is referring to that Achilles tendon or calcaneal tendon. So remember, calcaneal is referring to the bone calcaneus, okay? Moving on. Next one up, well, let's show you both images of gastrocnemius. So where did it go? Yep. So here's gastrocnemius, and then the one previous. So this is a lateral view. The previous one was looking at a posterior view, or a dorsal view. And then this is soleus. This is the one that we're going to look at next. This is interior to gastrocnemius, so it lies under gastrocnemius. And I wonder if there's another image to show you. Okay, so I guess you're only going to get one image of soleus. All right, and what do we need to know about soleus? It is deep or interior to gastrocnemius, and it is flat. It's sort of spindle-shaped, and it helps gastrocnemius in terms of its movement. So that is for that section, being able to chunk those three muscles. The last three muscles on page 2 include sacrospinalis, erector spinae, let's look at that one by itself. So when we talk about sacrospinalis, I want you to look at page, let's see, sacrospinalis, look at page 38. Okay, now notice on Van Greiner, they don't have it under sacrospinalis, they have it under erector spinae. So when you're looking at this, you can also see it on page 38 of your lab manual, figure 20, sacrospinalis is what they have written in your lab manual. And then again, remember, Van Greiner is calling it erector spinae. Either are appropriate. You can use whichever one you prefer. And so what I want to point out is that both terms are very suggestive of where to find this. So remember, erector is referring to something that is straight, and spinae is referring to the spine area. When we talk about sacrospinalis, that is also very descriptive of where it is. Sacro referring to the sacrum area, and spinalis referring to the spine. So both of those terms are the exact same muscle. They're just referred to differently in your lab book as opposed to the Van Greiner website, but they are the same thing. So what I want you to notice is that this is like a little window that's popped open so that you can see the muscle fibers of the erector spinae. And what is this that's being pulled back so that you can see erector spinae? I hope your answer is the lumbodorsal fascia, okay? That would be correct. All right, moving on, the last two on your page include temporalis and masseter. These are deeper muscles, and we can find these two. Actually, temporalis, go ahead and cross off. We won't be using this one because it's not listed in your lab manual, but I'm kind of interested to see if it is included. It is actually not included on It is not included on Van Greiner either, so that's perfectly fine. We'll go ahead and cross that off. But what you need to know about temporalis is that it is near the temples. We find it with a probe by finding where, sort of like using the probe to tap on the skull to see where it meets the muscle, and that's how we navigate where that muscle lies. But again, you can cross that one off for the kitty cat only, not for the human, just for the kitty cat. Moving on to the next one on our list is a masseter. So let's go ahead and pull up masseter. And with the masseter muscle, this is on page 44, figure 44. Figure 29 of your lab manual. And what you need to kind of understand about this is that this muscle sort of resembles like a big wad of chewing gum. And what is the action called of chewing when you have a bolus of food in your mouth? What do we refer to that as? Mastication, okay? So it's a mass or a ball of food that makes up that masseter muscle. I'm sorry, it's not a ball of food or a mass of food that makes up that muscle. The muscle itself is referred to as being the masseter. The action of the masseter muscle, one of the actions of the masseter muscle is chewing, or the act of mastication, not masturbation. Ha ha ha. Anyhow. Moving on, we have on the following page, we have digastric. So let's go ahead and look over at digastric. Let me make sure that we're following the right sequence. So let's look at digastric. Digastric and sternohyoid together, okay? Those are two that are very easy to lump together. And again, we can find those two on page 45 and 46 of our lab manual. So page 45 is digastric, and then page 46 is sternohyoid. So what do we need to know about digastric? It makes that inverted V. Oh, let's move digastric right here. So it makes that inverted V that we see both here and in our lab manual. It extends from the body of the mandible to the skull, and you can see by the way that the probes are in there how that is possible. Okay, so again, remember, if you can't envision that, picture bones. Okay, go back to your lab manual 1 and look back through those bones. Next up, after digastric, we have sternohyoid. And remember, sternohyoid is like two ribbon-like muscles. So we'll see that when, let's see, there it is. So sternohyoid, you can see there's a little line here that sort of separates them. So that sternohyoid is those two parallel muscles. They're sort of ribbon-like, and they extend from the sternum to the hyoid. All right, next up on your list is the SCM, or sternocleidomastoid. Okay, so let's look at sternocleidomastoid and levator scapulae. Let's look at those two muscles. So sternocleidomastoid we often refer to as the SCM, and with the SCM, we are going to omit that one from the kitty cat. And to read more about the SCM in your text, go ahead and look at page 13. It breaks down the SCM, sternocleidomastoid. We'll go over that in lab 3 when we talk about human musculature. For the kitty cat, there's a sternomastoid and a cleidomastoid, and we will not be looking at those on the images that we have, so you can cross that out for the cat. Next up, we have levator scapulae. So in the kitty cat, it is referred to as levator scapulae ventralis. So let's go back to levator scapulae. There we go. And you can see it comes down the like dorsal portion of the neck and shoulder. What else do we need to know about that? That's about it. Just think dorsal, neck, and shoulder. That's also a little ribbon-like. It's not quite as ribbon-like as the sternohyoid, but next up in your lab manual, we have rhomboideus major and minor. In the kitty cat, it is strictly referred to as rhomboideus. And the neat thing about this is that when you take the kitty cat on its tummy, when you flip it over on its tummy and you pull its arms together, it makes those rhomboids stick out on their back. So it's sort of like putting the kitty cat in a praying position. We talk about it being a praying position so that those rhomboids pop out. They're meaty, and it's a meaty, thick muscle. And it sits right in between those shoulder blades. So that is a good image, and it's also on page, it looks like 39, let me double check, 39 of your text. Yeah, it's a pretty good image on page 39, figure 22. Moving on to splenius capitis. Let me just double check that this wasn't one that was added. Okay, so splenius capitis is in your current text, In the kitty cat, we just simply refer to it as splenius. It is a flat, wide muscle, and it sits deep to clavotrapezius. So let's look at splenius. There we go. So here is levator scapulae ventralis, and then here is splenius right there. And then in your text, you can find that on page, in your lab manual, you can find that on page 44, same image, figure 30. Next up, we have, it looks like supra and infraspinatus. So if you go ahead and turn, let me get out of here. Okay, so supraspinatus, infraspinatus, there is, if you look very closely, there is a little triangle right here. This little triangle, if you can see me moving the mouse right now, there's that little triangle right there. And when we talk about supra, we are referring to something above. If we're referring to something infra, we're referring to something below. So that arrow kind of helps us to determine, because it creates a spine right here. So this arrow head, it looks sort of like this little yellow arrowhead right here, okay? So it's pointing, and this is the spine of the scapula. So that's what separates the superior portion to the inferior portion. And with the supraspinatus muscle, think it's your pitching muscle. So someone who is playing baseball or like throwing a football, somebody who uses that action. Next up, we have, let's go back. Next up on our list is, I believe, brachialis and biceps brachii. So biceps brachii and brachialis. So we are going to be looking at those two together. So this makes up the ventral arm of the cat. And let's see, do biceps brachii. So with biceps brachii, think anterior, it's that elongated muscle. It's on the ventral surface. It is also very spindle shaped. And I don't know if, ladies, I don't know if you have noticed men wearing t-shirts that will have an arrow pointing toward their arms, and it'll say, "Welcome to the gun show," or "Look at these guns," or something like that. That's what they're referring to. They're referring to biceps brachii and brachialis. So let's look at brachialis. We have images of those on page, it looks like 40, figure, let's see, 24 and 25. So let's go back so you can see biceps brachii right there, and then brachialis. Why isn't brachialis here? Okay, so I'm not seeing brachialis on here. So go ahead and just look in your lab manual on page 40, figure 25. It shows you brachialis, okay? So when you're a kid and you're hopscotching. A lot of kids used to play something called step on a crack, break your mother's back. So with brachialis, think break your mother's back. That's on the posterior side. So this muscle is posterior, okay? It's on the dorsal part of the arm. So brachialis, break your mother's back, whereas biceps brachii is the ventral part of the arm. So it's anterior or ventral. I'm really surprised that this isn't on here. So at any rate, go ahead and look in your lab manual for that image. And another maybe way to remember biceps brachii is it's saying I, like biceps brachii. And where do you find your eyes? Do you find them on the posterior part of your body? No, you find them anterior. So biceps brachii, think anterior. Your eye is anterior, biceps brachii muscle is anterior. And again, brachialis, if we're talking about break your mother's back, if it works, use it. If it doesn't, it's okay. You can figure out a way to remember it on your own. But sometimes just chunking the information and remembering it in a way that you can relate to is sometimes helpful. All right, moving on. Make sure we're still following sequence here. We just finished biceps brachii and brachialis. Now we're going to move on to, I want you to keep these ones together. Pectineus, adductor longus, adductor magnus, and adductor brevis. Now note that adductor magnus and brevis in the human is only referred to as adductor femoris within the kitty cat. So let's look at page, let's see, we will find these muscles on page 43. So turn to page 43 of your text, and it's figure 28. So let me pull this up. So here we go. So we have on page 43, figure 28 is showing you those pectineus, adductor longus, and adductor femoris. So pectineus, what I want you to think of is that this is an extremely small muscle, okay? Like it's really hard to see. It's very tiny, and the muscle that lies almost on top of that is adductor femoris. So adductor longus, adductor femoris sort of lie on top of that. So looking at adductor longus. Adductor longus is also a small muscle, but it's located on the upper margin of that adductor femoris muscle. And you can see that in that image on page 43 as well as here. So we're talking about pectineus, adductor longus, and adductor femoris, okay? So when we talk about these three muscles within the kitty cat, adductor femoris is a large triangular shaped muscle that lies deep to gracilis and then proximal to semimembranosus. So well, it is here, and we'll talk more about those in a second. But these three are really good to chunk together: pectineus, adductor longus, and then adductor femoris. Okay? Anything else for those? One way that I know students sometimes like to remember this is PALIF, so PALAF. If that works, go ahead and use it. If it doesn't, that's okay, just do your own thing. But PALAF, that's an order, okay? PALAF, PALAF. And then to build on that, you could do a double S at the end of that. And that's because we're going to be talking about, next up we have in your book, well, let's wait on that. You'll see how this is all going to come together because on page 43, it's showing you semimembranosus and semitendinosus as well as here. So sometimes students like to do PALAFSS, okay? If it works, use it. If it doesn't, that's okay. I want to follow the sequence of your book, so these two are at the very bottom of your list. So we'll just continue to follow the sequence, but if learning them in that mnemonic way is more helpful, that's okay too. Next up, after our adductor femoris muscles, I want you to look at your quad muscles. And those are vastus medialis, vastus intermedius, vastus lateralis, and rectus femoris. So these are what we call your hot dog muscles. So let's go ahead and get out of this image and go to, let's do this guy. All right, so here's one image that we can see our hot dog muscles. So one way to think about this is that you have a hot dog and then you have each side of the bun. So with, and remember that you can see by looking through that vastus intermedius is omitted from the cat. Okay, so just go ahead and cross that off. It's underneath rectus femoris and vastus lateralis, but we are going to omit that from the kitty cat. When we're looking at the image, the word image of our hot dog muscles, of our quads, what we can think of is that rectus femoris is long and round, and you can see rectus femoris right here. So this is what actually makes up the hot dog, okay? And then we have vastus lateralis, vastus medialis that make up each side of the bun. And remember, if we're looking at this, rectus femoris, what does that tell us? It's a straight, rectus tells us it's something straight, and femoris is referring to the femur bone. So that is very evident right here. And then on top, not on top of that, near there, you know, lateralis and medialis, vastus is referring to what? A vast area, a big area. And then we have lateralis, which means the lateral part of your thigh, and then we have vastus medialis, which is the medial part of your thigh. So that right there makes up your hot dog muscles or your quads, okay? If it works, use it. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. So vastus lateralis, let's look at that one. It is deep to biceps femoris, and again, it makes up the lateral portion of the bun. When we talk about vastus medialis, we know that it makes up the medial portion of the bun. What else do we need to know about that? Let's see. Okay, so what do our quads do in general? They're a large group of muscles. They make up a large area of a muscle group of the thigh, and it is the prime mover of the knee. Moving on to biceps femoris, semimembranosus, and semitendinosus. So sometimes students like to chunk these three together. Sometimes they like to take the semimembranosus and the semitendinosus and put it with pectineus as well as adductor longus and adductor femoris. Okay, so it's up to you however you want to do this, but it's just the way that your brain works. Okay, so does it work better keeping things chunked together? Does it work in smaller bits or, you know, location area? At any rate, let's look at biceps femoris. So when we talk about biceps femoris, it is on the dorsal thigh. We also refer to this one as being our jumping muscle. It makes up a large lateral surface of that dorsal part of thigh. It's attached to tensor fascia lata, and you can see that on page, let's see, looks like it's going to be on page, let's see, biceps, femoris. Okay, so biceps femoris is actually on page 38, figure 21. 38, page 38, figure 21. And then we'll look at semimembranosus and semitendinosus. And again, that's the same image that we looked at for adductor femoris, adductor longus, and pectineus. And that was on page 43, figure 28. So semimembranosus, that one is more anterior or medial, and semitendinosus is more posterior. Okay, semimembranosus is very thick and deep to gracilis, and it is divided into two portions. When we talk about the dorsal thigh, we refer to these as our hammies or our hamstrings. So this muscle group of three are our hamstring muscles or our hammies. And again, they aid in jumping together as a group. And there are three muscles that make up your hamstring muscle group, okay? And what are those three? Biceps femoris, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, okay? This is your hammies. What are those responsible for? It's for flexion of the hip and knee. It's also responsible for walking and running. And I believe that is the last of our muscles for the kitty cat on pages 2 and 3. So this lecture is typically divided into 2 lectures. What I typically do when I teach this is do the kitty cat muscles on page 2, 1 lab day. The next lab day I do the kitty cat muscles on 3, and then if we have time we begin human musculature. If not, then on the next lab session, lab 3, lab activity 3, is when we continue going over human musculature and do review for the exam that follows the next week. Again, review your syllabus so that you know exactly how to study. Remember that there are going to be 13 human questions and 12 kitty cat questions. And get into, let me get out of here. Let me see. And remember, if you go back to this page, not only can you give yourself a practice exam, but again, all the answers are already there. And the other thing that I want to point out is that your lab manual has images that are just black and white. And one thing that I want to point out is that in order for you to be able to color these in, you're not going to get the answers for this out of your lab manual to know which muscle is which. The way that you're going to do that is to go to the human musculature. So for instance, let me see what page this lines up with on let me go back a moment. Okay, so this is a good image of the one that I just popped up. So this is going to give you the answers to, for instance, this page. What I do want to point out is that in your lab manual, it's going to say locate the following structures and then give you a list. And then underneath of that, it says additional structures. You can cross the additional structures out because they're not very good images located on the images within Van Greiner. So the same thing if we were to turn over to page 22. You have locate these following structures, so this group and this group, but then underneath of that it says these additional structures. So those additional structures underneath of here, you don't have to know for this image, okay? But it means you still have to know these muscles, you just don't need to know them here. So you can cross off the additional structures like they're not even there. These are the ones that need to be identified because I'm not going to test you over these muscles because they don't look good on this image, but they'll look good on a different image, okay? If that doesn't make sense, just go ahead and email me for clarification. But one more time, locate the following structures. All these that are located under, locate the following structures, those are the ones that you need to be able to identify. Underneath additional structures, these ones you do not need to be able to identify on the image that it's attached to. So if we went to page 24, figure 5. Page 24, figure 5, you do not need to know iliacus, psoas major, psoas minor, or quadratus lumborum on this image, but you need to know it on a different image, okay? So this image, you don't need to know what that looks like here, okay? Lastly, if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I am here, easy to get a hold of, and I hope that this is helpful. Feel free to email me and say, yes, I liked your presentation this way. It made it more concise. I hated it. It was terrible. I don't know, whatever you want to pass along is fine with me. And I will take all of that into consideration and do better. So, that said, you guys take care. You know where to find me. And I will be in touch. Okay? Bye.